It's a great honor, this honor degree, coming from a great university, 200 years old, inserted in the very core of the history of this city, this province, this area, this country. And it's very interesting. I had a good look at who you are. And this is an unusual university. I mean, there's a good percentage from Halifax and from Nova Scotia and from around the Atlantic provinces. But what's amazing is about half of you, and I think it's about 12% from around the world, which is a great percentage. But what's really fascinating is about half of you come from elsewhere in Canada. And what that, and you know, undergraduates, and what this is very unusual in universities. And what this means is that Dalhousie is, and the President and I were talking about this beforehand, Dalhousie is, as it has always been, a national university. It's both a city, a regional, but it's a national university with so many students coming from so many provinces and then staying here, many I hope, or going home, with the influence and the ideas and the attitudes of Dalhousie. This is a very exciting characteristic of this wonderful education which you've had here, and I thought it was fabulous to see so many. I mean, I thought the mixes of things you've been doing were very, very interesting. Neuroscience and philosophy, was it? Music, neuroscience and music. That was an amazing combination. But there were lots and lots of amazing combinations that I heard from all of you. Let me add to that I need to thank the graduates for allowing me to join you at the very last minute. I did actually skip out on all the classes and all the exams. You didn't invite me to the parties, mind you, but nevertheless, we're linked now in a very curious destiny. In a sense, my job today is to speak with you and for you in front of everybody else. But, you know, you're actually part, you and a couple of years before you and a couple of years in the future, you're part of something very new. There's been a remarkable explosion in life expectancy. It's been happening throughout the 20th century and it's continuing. We've literally doubled life expectancy in 100 years. It took from the end of the Roman Empire to 1900 to double it, the first time. And we did it in 100 years. And this means that, in a sense, the structures in place are structured for life expectancy in the late 19th century. That's when we put in place our schools and our universities and all our systems, retirement and so on. And here you are, you're basically live to be somewhere between 90 and 100. You know, this is what's going to happen unless you're silly enough to walk across the street and get run over or something. But so you're part of this astonishing explosion in life expectancy. It means you're going to live longer than any other group of people have ever lived in history. And what it also means is that just as I'm speaking for you today, you're going to have to speak for me for at least 50 years. And speak for all the people on stage, except for the new PhD, and for your parents, and your grandparents, and so on. So you carry an interesting responsibility that's never really existed before. And I think the first thing that, I think you should be thinking about is the extent to which you as graduates are going to need to speak up for the next generation of students. So why do I say that? And this is where I never know why people give me honorary degrees because I'm a troublesome sort. But anyway, you know, you're going to have to speak up for these people, and why? Well, because in a way, you are part of a approach, not of this university, of our society, which is coming to an end. And it's a time that we've been living in which people with authority have tried to pass, every year a little more, the costs of everything, including public education, as far down the line from those who have the money, as far down the line onto individual citizens, and in the case of education, onto students. And the result is that many of you parents for escaping it, but many of you will finish have finished your undergraduate degree with a debt level, which is like having a mortgage, but without a house. And as your parents will tell you, that it was not actually the purpose of mortgages. You're supposed to get a house out of it. And this debt is not actually helpful because, in a way, and I think you have to think hard about this, because it can discourage young graduates from taking risks with their careers. And the president started out right at the beginning by drawing attention that, we need you to be thinking and doing. And so you must not allow, if you have heavy debts, to be sort of panicked into the idea, God, I've got to get the easiest job that will pay me that I can pay off my debt. Now, your parents are going to hate you for saying this. But really, in the long run, it's essential to think about the importance of not taking this astonishing education and being now discouraged from taking risks with what you do next. Creative risks, entrepreneurial risks, inventive risks. And I can see signs that you want to do it, because otherwise you wouldn't be making these combinations in your studies. You clearly want to take those kind of risks. You sense that you need to invent something new, that what was there before is not enough. But you have to be aware of the fact that if you don't think about this carefully, that this kind of debt can push grads towards safer kinds of employment and away from risks. And I have to say that I believe that governments at all levels have not thought this through at all, nor have the economists, forgive me, professors. This is a period of great economic uncertainty. We need our graduates to burst out of the gates, ready to reinvent what we're doing out there, to reinvent the way our economies function, the way our societies function, and not to feel that they're tied down by debt and obliged to take the safe and conservative route. And let me add to this one more thing. Students taking summer jobs is a great Canadian tradition. We all did it. I think I shoveled manure, chicken manure to be precise, for a full summer. Made great use of public water afterwards. But students being obliged to work during the school term to cover their costs, that's wrong. That's just wrong. Rushing from class to flipping burgers, how does that add to the quality of education? It doesn't. Or whatever other small part-time jobs students have been able to get. University is supposed to be a time for reading, thinking, debating, building community, spending time. What looks like wasting time, which is an intellectual activity. Right? Thinking looks like that. People always say, what are you doing? I say, I'm writing. Well, you don't have a pen in your hand. Well, that's because I'm thinking. It doesn't show, Students need what looks like free time to do all that. Instead, the current financial structures push society and students away from that thinking idea, that creative, imagining idea of education, towards a narrow, utilitarian idea of training. And I know your professors don't believe in that. I know the university doesn't believe in that. I'm talking about what society tries to push you and us towards. And yet, this is not a time for that approach. This is a time when everything needs to be reimagined. This is the very worst of times to rush students into a narrow, utilitarian model of getting a job. And here's another thing. We seem to have forgotten. I was really pleased to see how many had done history. Because, that's knowledge. That's understanding who and where we are. We seem to have forgotten that democracy in Canada, the creation of our egalitarian society, it's a very particular thing, is built on public education. Every one of the people who fought for democracy in Canada in the 19th century also fought for public education, public and free education. They saw democracy and free public education as totally interwoven right across the country to British Columbia, from here to British Columbia. And this has been true since the beginning of our democracy. The great Joseph Howe, Halifax, in 1848, 170 years ago, said, "If you were my brother, I would not permit your interest to weigh a feather against a trust so sacred as I believe our public school system to be." And Howe's great political enemy, another Nova Scotian, Charles Tupper, in 1865, the schools of the country must be free and open to all. And I could go on quoting Atlantic Canadians, one after the other, and I see the Chancellor nodding. I mean, the whole history of Atlantic Canada is filled with great people who believed in free public education. And so here's the thing. The kind of job you can get today with a BA is approximately the kind of job you could have got in 1900, so 118 years ago, with a high school graduation. In other words, a graduation coming out of the free public school system. And so what we've done is we've, in a sense, added 4 years on, which is a great, enriching 4 years. That's an incredible addition to your education. But the job at the end of that is approximately the same as the high school graduate would have been able to apply for in 1900. So what that means is that given the history of Canada, egalitarian, democratic, and free education, there is every reason for undergraduate education in Canada to be free of tuition.
Hear, hear.
Say it can't be done. Well, the only reason we can't think it can't be done is because we're at the end of decades of this utilitarian approach towards financing things, which has led us to believe that we can't do things like that. But I can tell you this, every single major public, national, provincial, and national program in Canada created over the last 170 years, every single one of them was created without the money being available. Public school system, the railways, healthcare, you name it. Alan McEachen, another great Nova Scotian, who made healthcare really happen. I mean, there wasn't the money for healthcare. We knew we needed to do it. So then we figured out how to pay for it. That's really how you do public. So this is a moment when the whole idea of jobs, of employment, of entrepreneurship, is up in the air, in part because of the unending breakthroughs in technology and the changes in international structures to do with taxation and controls over large corporations and so on. And what I'm saying is that we have to break away from these now tired and dated ideas of how financing works when we're facing things like education and employment and entrepreneurship. We have to reimagine our relationship with machines, which we are not doing. We're simply using them as if they were in charge, to make sure that we are in charge. I mean, after all, we imagined them, we invented them, we set up the companies to build them, we sold them, and suddenly the people to whom it is to their advantage financially declare the machines are in control, we just have to sort of do what they say. So suddenly we go from being brilliant and clever and all the rest of it to being idiots and having become victims of machinery, as if technology cannot be shaped and controlled. I'm sorry, the history of the world is filled with the shaping and controlling of technology by civilizations. Most of us have chosen not to use chemical warfare. Those who have nuclear bombs have chosen not to drop nuclear bombs. And I could go on with the list that one of the signs of civilization is that we decide that technology will not tell us what to do, that we will eventually get control of it and shape it. Otherwise, it will provoke a crisis in our citizen-based societies. There is nothing more uninteresting, mediocre, and ideological than an interest group which hides behind machines in order to make more money at the expense of stable democracy. And we have to be conscious of that. So this is not a time to be obsessed by low-level utilitarianism, low-level utilitarian ideas of efficiency, which have been so dominant over the last few decades. It's not a time to be squeezing money out from here and there as opposed to looking at the essential components which create large amounts of money and under the current systems are able to keep them. Your generation and the generations just around you have the luck or the misfortune, depending on your point of view, to come along at a time when we're going to have to be incredibly creative, inventive, and ready to rethink what our lives, your lives, look like. I already know what mine looks like. You're going to have to really work out what you want your lives to look like, and not to be pushed around by people who say that can't be done because of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is not. It's just something waiting to be shaped and controlled by us. That's all it is. Don't be fooled. So let me just give you an example of what I'm talking about. Decade after decade, we have invented machines, from vacuum cleaners to computers to artificial intelligence mechanisms, to do our work for us, which means that we should be doing less work, but being paid the same amount or indeed a great deal more. It's been a great victory, except for the last part of that sentence. It should give each of you more free time to read, to think, to engage as citizens, to volunteer, and to help each other. All these technological breakthroughs should be strengthening democracy instead of weakening them. It's only weakening democracy because we're not having the courage and the imagination to put in place the structures which will allow us to, A, share the wealth, and B, have control over what these things do. Everybody said, well, women will be freer because of, a lot of people wrote about this, because of all these household tools. Instead of that, women are actually working harder than ever, still not getting paid properly, and still not being respected properly. That's changing, thank God. It is changing, but it's taken a long time, and I see a lot of people nodding. So it's still what's happened. Before many of these breakthroughs, you had a one-salary family, usually the guy, who was able to support, I'm not going into the details, able to support, a wife, 2, 3 children. Today, both parents work. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but both parents have to work, and often they have to have 2 jobs each. And it's getting tougher and tougher to support the family. What that tells you is that we have made a mess of shaping the economy, a complete mess of all the advantages. We've allowed other people to turn those advantages into advantages only for a small group, and not for us. And that is really one of the things that I think you're faced with. In fact, what I guess I'm saying is that my generation, a couple of generations around mine, have been intellectually and politically lazy on this front, very passive. We've allowed private interests, big private interests, large monopolies and oligopolies, indifferent to borders and to democracy and to the power of citizens. We have allowed these enormous organizations to gather up all the financial benefits of the technological breakthroughs and then to eke out small amounts to the rest of society. Now, that can be fixed. It's not that we fixed that kind of thing in the late 19th century. We fixed it in the early 20th century. We fixed it in the 1930s. We fixed it in the 1970s. And suddenly we're acting as if we can't fix it this time. It's simply not true. It's just a matter of self-confident citizens. I watch you walk across the stage. You're self-confident. You can do this. Of strong citizens fighting for clear, powerful, pro-democracy laws and regulations. That's your job. We all have jobs. I mean, in a way, our generation has, made some really important breakthroughs. We're starting to rebuild our relationship with Indigenous people. God knows 100 years late, after horrible things were done. We're starting to, some real breakthroughs did take place. Healthcare did take place. So it's not that nothing happened, but in this area, which is turning out to be so crucial, we have, in fact, failed. And it's got to do with you reimagining, I think it does anyway, how democracy and the sharing of wealth can be strengthened in this era of new technology. It's going to take an enormous creative and political effort. It's going to consume your lives, whether you like it or not. I'm very, very good at what's going to happen. I'm sometimes very bad at just get the dates. You know, is it going to be next year or the year after? But I have a really good track record for what's going to happen next. And I'm absolutely convinced that your lives are going to be consumed by this fight. You know, so look around at what's happening in the world today. See, we can't help but look at the United States. And so many people tell themselves that when Trump is gone, because eventually he will be gone, all will return to normal. No, it won't. It will not return to normal, because he is just a symptom of a profound crisis. He's just the sort of buffoon distracting us from the crisis, the very profound crisis. Writhing in confused nationalism, wanting to go out on its own precisely at the moment when regions are closing borders everywhere. If there's a moment when there are moments you don't walk down the street just when everybody shuts their door and locks it. Talk about bad timing and not thinking it through. Look at the ugly government being formed in Italy. It's been building up for 20 years now to this point. People who are in this government who are going to be filled with fear, who are afraid of immigrants, who are afraid of public policies. Look at the situation in Hungary getting worse and worse and worse. Look at the situation in Poland, in the Philippines. Look at Russia slipping back into the worst kind of autocracy. Look at China, to all of our amazement. An economic reform followed suddenly by a president who's there for life. We have not seen such a rise of authoritarianism and racism, and I only named a few countries. We have not seen this in a very long time. Fear and exclusion is building around the world. Why? Because we have not been imaginative and creative in facing today's realities, of which technology is one of the big pieces. So the merchants of fear have taken advantage of people's worries, our worries. The result, democracy, citizenship, the breakthroughs in personal and human justice of the last few decades may be at risk. I mean, we've made amazing breakthroughs in egalitarian, equal position for women. It's really finally we're getting through those last barriers. Amazing breakthroughs in the LGBTQI front. We really, in Canada, are starting to find how to have a conversation with Indigenous people. And I could go on and on. We really, in terms of personal rights and personal justice, we've made enormous progress. But I fear that if this other stuff, this economic mess, is allowed to continue, these rights, in an atmosphere of fear, will be put in danger. Again, look at the United States. Look at Hungary. Look at Poland. Look at even at Italy. People are simply saying, no, we're going to go backwards on these rights. Nothing is fixed forever unless you get up every morning and fight for it. But you can't just fight for that right. You have to fight in the areas where the damage is being done, where the danger is coming from. So it is very good that in Canada we have still a consensus on immigration and fast citizenship for immigrants. This is great. But we are virtually now alone in the Western democracies in having a consensus like this. It's very tough to maintain a national consensus. We're not small, either physically or in population, but how long can 36 million people hold together an anti-fear, anti-racist consensus when we're surrounded with virtually all of our allies going down this very dangerous and ugly road? We have to be very conscious of the work that has to be done in order to resist the threats of populism. It's not going to happen because we're nice. It's not going to happen because we don't want it to happen. It's going to happen because we think our way through these things, and we are very strong, and I'm talking about you. That we refuse the temptations to slip down the roads of our neighbors and our allies and our friends. Right now, every time somebody like what the Chancellor was, a senior public official, goes into an international meeting, they're surrounded by allies who are using very negative terms when it comes to, for example, issues of immigration and citizenship. The Canadian has to sit there and say, no, we know how to do this. We make mistakes, we know how to do this. It's a very uncomfortable position to be in. So there has to be a real understanding among the population that this is a battle, that we can be on the winning side, but it is not won. It is not won. And the worst, frankly, lies ahead. And this crisis is not going away. It's spreading. And that means, and I'm sorry, I know that this is, up till I got to the stage, it was a real celebration. But what this means is that when your graduation celebrations are over, and make them as long as you possibly can, and then you'll be faced soon enough, yes, by the need to work, but also by love, and by family, and by children, and for many of you it'll happen very fast if it hasn't already, and the need, obviously, for money. But on top of all of that, you and the generations a bit before you and the generations a bit behind you have a great mission, I believe. That it happens periodically. Some people slide through, it's a period of 30 or 40 years and it's all very stable and it all looks like it's going to last forever. And then there are these moments of crisis, and you happen to be graduating right into a moment of crisis. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. And you do, whether you want it or not, have a great mission, a great opportunity. You are going to have to be part of reimagining how we will remain and continue to become a just and fair society in very difficult times. And as I say, not every generation is faced with this, with such enormous tasks, which require courage and imagination. Yours is, that's your destiny. On the other hand, how wonderful to know that your lives will require such a great task. What a fabulous thing to know that your lives are coming at a time when you're actually needed. When those things that I heard you've been learning, all of those things are incredibly important for the reimagining of what we can do and where we can go. And besides, there is nothing worse, pretty well except the Civil War, there is nothing worse than a life of boredom. And I don't think you're going to have a life of boredom, because these are very, very difficult and exciting times. Nothing is more exciting than a great adventure, and I think your lives are going to be a great adventure. Best of luck. Merci.